My parents tried to trap me into quitting my job and raising my sister's baby while she partied. So I vanished. What happened after that shattered every illusion they had about family loyalty and control. I'm not the rebellious type. I'm not someone who runs from problems or turns my back on family. At least I wasn't. But there's only so much you can take before something inside you snaps. And that moment came for me on an ordinary Tuesday night at a dinner table that had once felt like a place of safety. People talk about family being everything, that you should sacrifice for them, do what's right, put their needs first. I used to believe that too, until I realized that in my family, sacrifice only ever meant one thing: me giving up parts of myself so my sister could continue making a mess of her life without consequences. I never imagined I'd walk away from everything I'd known. But when your love is used as leverage, when your sense of duty is twisted into a leash around your neck, you start to see things differently. You stop asking what's expected of you and start asking what you owe yourself. This is the story of how I broke free, not with shouting or slamming doors, but with planting silence and a quiet kind of courage I didn't know I had. My name is Melanie Carter. I'm 27 years old, born and raised in a quiet suburb outside Austin, Texas. I work as a UI designer for a mid-sized tech company, and I've been with them for almost 3 years. I work from home, which some people think is a dream, but anyone who's done it knows it takes discipline and boundaries, two things I've worked hard to build for myself. After college, I moved back in with my parents temporarily to pay off my student loans faster and save for a down payment on my own place. It wasn't ideal, but it made sense financially. Rent prices in Austin were ridiculous, and I figured a couple of years at home wouldn't kill me. I paid monthly to live there, handled all my expenses, helped out around the house, and stayed out of everyone's way. I wasn't lazy, and I certainly wasn't mooching. I had a plan, and I stuck to it. I kept my space clean, kept my head down, and made it clear I was only there until I was ready to buy my first condo. My parents and I didn't have a perfect relationship, but we were fine. They respected my space mostly. My mom sometimes made small comments about how she missed when I was little and more dependent on her, and my dad had a habit of walking into my room without knocking, but overall we managed. Things started shifting when my sister Harper came back. Harper is 30, the classic golden child. She was always louder, more dramatic, more chaotic. She had a flair for turning every situation into a scene. Growing up, she got all the attention while I was expected to stay quiet, be responsible, and never make trouble. I did everything right. I got good grades, held jobs through college, and never asked for help unless I absolutely had to. Harper, on the other hand, was always someone else's problem to fix. She drifted from job to job, boyfriend to boyfriend, city to city. She had a knack for falling apart and somehow landing on a cushion of sympathy and support. And every single time she crashed, my parents would drop everything to catch her. So when she came home with bags under her eyes, a story about a breakup and a baby on the way, I already knew what was coming. I just didn't know how bad it would get. Harper showed up one Sunday afternoon without warning. I was in the middle of finishing a deadline when I heard her voice echoing through the hallway. She sounded upbeat, almost performative, like she was preparing for an audience. When I walked into the living room, she was already on the couch sipping lemonade from one of my mugs like she owned the place. My mom hovered around her smiling too hard, while my dad brought in a suitcase from the car. Harper caught my eye and gave me a casual nod, like we'd seen each other yesterday instead of over a year ago. My parents didn't even bother with introductions or explanations. It wasn't until dinner that they mentioned Harper would be staying for a while. The phrase was vague, but the tone was final. I asked what a while meant, and my mom just smiled and said, "Let's not stress about timelines. She needs us right now." That's when Harper dropped the news that she was pregnant. I froze fork in mid-air. She delivered it like she was announcing a vacation. No tremble, no regret. Just a matter of fact, yeah, about 5 months along. The father. Apparently a guy she'd been seeing in New Orleans who disappeared the second she showed him the ultrasound. Harper didn't seem too broken up about it. My parents, of course, went into full crisis mode. Within days, they had turned the upstairs guest room into a cozy nursery suite. They ordered furniture online, rearranged closets, and started talking about baby names like this was some kind of group project. I kept my head down and stayed out of it. If they wanted to pour their time and money into Harper again, fine. I wasn't going to get in the way. But I should have known it wouldn't stop there. My mom started making little comments like how nice it would be for Harper to have a calm presence around during her pregnancy. My dad brought up how grateful he was that I worked from home. "It's a blessing for the whole family," he said. Harper started treating the house like a co-owned property. She'd leave her shopping bags on the kitchen counter, blast her music through the speakers while I was on Zoom calls, and raid the fridge without asking. One morning, I opened the fridge to find my meal-prepped lunches gone. When I asked about them, Harper shrugged and said I was craving protein. My mom said I should have labeled them more clearly if I didn't want to share. That's when I realized I was being softened up. Slowly but surely, they were blurring the line between temporary housemate and live-in support system. Harper began casually asking me to pick things up from the store while I was out. It started with small stuff prenatal vitamins, almond milk snacks. Then she began dropping comments like, "It'll be so great having you around when the baby comes. I'll need breaks, you know." My mom echoed it during a walk. "She's going to need help." Being a single mother isn't easy. The expectation was creeping in like fog, and I could already feel it settling on my shoulders. I hadn't been asked to volunteer. I was being drafted. When I brought up concerns about boundaries, my dad waved me off and said, "This is just a phase. We all pitch in for family." The unspoken rule in our house had always been that Harper's chaos was a team effort, but this time I wasn't willing to play along. I watched as my parents invested in every need Harper had. They paid for prenatal care maternity clothes, even signed her up for a birthing class she never attended. They cut into their savings without blinking. And all the while, they kept praising Harper for trying her best and hinting at how helpful I could be if I just made a few small adjustments to my schedule. It didn't take long for me to see the full picture. They weren't just supporting Harper. They were planning for me to fill in the blanks. I was the safety net beneath the safety net. I wasn't being consulted, I was being positioned. The pressure didn't explode all at once. It leaked into my life in small, deliberate drops. First, it was the constant comments about how lucky I was to work from home. My mom would say it with a bright smile. "You're so fortunate to be here for all of this." I never asked to be here for any of it. Then Harper started using my office chair without asking, saying hers was uncomfortable. She'd wander into my room during work hours complaining loudly about how hard it was to sleep or how bored she was during the day. If I closed my door, she'd knock, and if I didn't answer right away, she'd tell my mom I was being cold. The worst part was how my parents started picking up her complaints and redirecting them at me. My mom said I needed to be more compassionate and understanding because pregnancy was hard. My dad said I could stand to be a little less rigid since we were all family. It wasn't long before they started laying out a narrative that I wasn't being helpful enough. I began hearing things like, "It's just one grocery run," or "Can't you watch Harper's appointment schedule for her?" She's overwhelmed. My free time evaporated. Evenings that I once spent relaxing or going for walks turned into last-minute errands, forced family dinners, and awkward silences filled with unspoken expectations. I began to dread coming out of my room. One day, Harper announced she had signed up for a prenatal yoga class that happened to coincide with my lunch break. She looked at me while saying, "It's such a relief knowing someone will be home in case something happens." There was no question, no request, just an assumption. I was becoming a shadow presence in her life, a built-in support system she didn't earn but fully expected. The breaking point came 2 weeks later during a particularly tense dinner. My dad had ordered takeout to bring us together, but the moment we sat down, the conversation turned. My mom cleared her throat and said, "Your sister's due date is closer than we think, and we've been talking about how to plan for it." I didn't respond. She continued, "You being here is such a blessing. Since you work from home and have experience managing your schedule, it just makes sense for you to help out once the baby arrives." My dad nodded like it was already settled. Harper didn't even look up from her phone. I stared at them, fork still in hand, and asked, "What kind of help are we talking about?" My mom's tone turned syrupy sweet. "Just holding the baby when Harper needs a break, helping with feedings if she's tired. You know, the little things." My dad added, "It's not full-time care or anything, just whenever you're home and not working." My pulse quickened. "I'm always home. That's the problem." My mom blinked confused. Well, it's not like you're in meetings all day, are you? That was it. That was the moment I knew they didn't respect what I did, who I was, or what my time was worth. They saw me as a utility, a live-in resource, a caretaker by default. Let me get this straight, I said, putting down my fork. You want me to work full-time and then clock in as Harper's unpaid nanny? My dad looked uncomfortable, but my mom pressed on. It's not about money, Melanie. It's about family. Harper finally chimed in, barely glancing at me. It's really not a big deal. You're here anyway. That phrase, "you're here anyway," echoed in my mind for days. It reduced my presence, my work, my life to background noise. I wasn't living there anymore. I was occupying space in someone else's plan. The days after that dinner were suffocating. My parents tiptoed around me, waiting for me to come to my senses. Harper acted like nothing had happened, lounging on the couch, leaving dishes in the sink, and tossing laundry onto the communal sofa. Every interaction became a test. My mom would say, "I just need a small favor," and wait to see if I refused. If I did, she sighed like I was heartless. My dad stopped asking and started assigning. "Can you move your meetings on Tuesday? Harper has a checkup and needs the car." Harper used my toiletries without asking, left passive-aggressive notes on the fridge about cleaning, and started occupying the only quiet space in the house during my work hours. One evening, I returned from a quick drive to find she had invited 2 friends over. They were laughing loudly sitting on the patio I'd put together with my own money. I walked past them and into the house, pretending not to hear her say, "She's so uptight lately." Later that night, I opened the fridge to find my groceries gone again. I had bought enough food to last me through the week, and now it was empty except for a note. "We made sandwiches. Hope that's okay." I didn't confront her. I didn't even speak. I went to my room and started planning, because I finally understood the truth. This wasn't going to change. They weren't going to wake up one day and see how unfair this all was. They had built a system, and I was just another cog in it. Unless I did something drastic, I'd spend the next year buried in diapers and resentment. I wasn't going to let that happen. It was a Wednesday night when everything came to a head. I had just finished a long day of back-to-back meetings and was looking forward to reheating the last bit of leftover pasta I had stashed in the fridge. But when I opened it, the container was gone. In its place was a box of takeout labeled with Harper's name. I stood there for a second, staring at the empty shelf, the small plastic container nowhere to be found. My stomach clenched. I walked into the living room where Harper was stretched across the couch, scrolling through her phone, a half-eaten salad beside her. I asked, trying to stay calm. "Did you eat my pasta?" She barely glanced up. "Oh, yeah. I didn't think you'd mind. I was starving and it was just sitting there." I inhaled slowly. "It was mine. I bought it. I was saving it." She rolled her eyes. "It's just food, Melanie. Relax." I turned and walked upstairs without another word, but something shifted in me in that moment. The next day, I came home from a walk and saw my parents sitting in the dining room with Harper. My mom looked up like she had been waiting for me. "Melanie, can we talk?" I sat down across from them, arms folded. My dad cleared his throat. "We've been thinking about how to prepare for the baby's arrival," my mom added. "We know this might feel sudden, but we need to start creating a routine." I didn't say anything. My dad continued. "Since you're already living here and working from home, we think it makes the most sense for you to help Harper during the first few months." I looked directly at Harper. She said nothing. She just shrugged like it wasn't her idea, but she wasn't about to argue with it either. My mom smiled tightly. "It's just, until she finds her rhythm. You'd still have your own time. We'd all pitch in." My voice was low and even. "What exactly are you expecting me to do?" My dad responded. "Watch the baby when Harper needs rest, help during the day if she has errands, maybe prepare a few meals now and then." I leaned back. "So you want me to be her full-time unpaid nanny while working a full-time job from home?" My mom's face tightened. "That's not what we said." I didn't raise my voice. "It's exactly what you said. You're asking me to give up my autonomy so Harper can recover without adjusting her lifestyle." Harper chimed in then. "You're being dramatic. It's just a baby. You act like it's a prison sentence." I turned to her. "No, I act like it's not my child." My dad jumped in. "That's enough. We're all family here. We help each other. That's how it works. I stood up. You help Harper. I provide free labor. That's not family. That's manipulation. My mom's voice sharpened. Don't speak about your sister like that. She's going through enough. I stared at all of them. And I've been working, paying rent, cleaning up after people, and now you're telling me that unless I give more, I don't belong here. My dad's jaw clenched. If you can't support your family during hard times, then maybe we need to rethink this arrangement. I narrowed my eyes. Are you threatening to kick me out? My mom interrupted. No one's being kicked out. But if you can't contribute more, it's only fair we discuss adjusting your rent. I let out a short laugh. So either I babysit for free or you raise my rent to force me out. That's what this is, my mom whispered. We just thought you'd want to help. I looked at Harper again, who was now biting her nails and avoiding eye contact. I said, You never asked. You assumed. You've always assumed I would carry what you couldn't handle. My dad's voice rose. Enough, Melanie. You're blowing this out of proportion. We're trying to make this work. I looked at all of them one by one. No, you're trying to make it easier for Harper by making it harder for me, but I'm not doing it. I'm done being the fallback plan. I turned and walked out of the room. My heart was racing, but my mind was clear. I knew what I had to do. There was no fixing this through another conversation. No negotiation or compromise would change the fact that they saw me not as a daughter, but as a resource. And I wasn't going to be used anymore. After that night, I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped defending my boundaries or asking them to see things from my perspective. Instead, I started planning, quietly, carefully, without a hint of drama. I knew any direct confrontation would lead to more guilt trips or manipulative arguments, so I kept my head down and pretended everything was fine. I continued going to work, doing my tasks, smiling politely at dinner. But behind the scenes, I was preparing my exit. The first thing I did was start packing the non-essentials. A few books, framed photos, old journals, my backup electronics. I boxed them neatly and stored them in the trunk of my car under a blanket. I emptied my desk drawer and moved important files to a cloud drive, making sure nothing valuable was left behind. I took pictures of all my belongings, furniture, electronics, even the serial numbers on my laptop and monitor, just in case. I knew Harper had a habit of conveniently forgetting what belonged to her and what didn't. Then I reached out to an old colleague, Lisa, who had once mentioned needing a roommate. We weren't close, but we had worked well together and shared a similar schedule. I sent her a message, casual but direct, asking if she was still looking. She replied within 10 minutes. Yes, the second bedroom was still available. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was clean, quiet, and came with respectful boundaries. The rent was manageable utilities split evenly. I asked if I could see the room that weekend. She agreed, no questions asked. That Friday, I visited her apartment under the pretense of running errands. The place was small but cozy. A 2-bedroom near downtown with a shared kitchen and a living room filled with plants and sunlight. It felt like peace. I said I'd move in within 2 weeks. She smiled and handed me a spare key. After that, I drafted a formal notice letter. It wasn't legally necessary since I was living with my parents, but I wanted it in writing. I printed 2 copies and signed both. I didn't want to leave room for ambiguity. Then I waited. I didn't want to spark suspicion, so I continued going through the motions. I helped with dishes, made small talk, and nodded during conversations about Harper's baby shower. But every day, I moved another small piece of my life into my car. By the end of the week, my closet was half empty and my laptop bag contained more than just cables. Late one night, while everyone was asleep, I slipped the letter under my parents' bedroom door. I didn't sleep much after that. My heart was pounding and I kept imagining every possible reaction they might have. But I didn't regret it. The next evening when I came home from work, they were both waiting for me in the kitchen. My mom had the letter in her hand like it was a betrayal. "What is this?" she asked. My voice was steady. "It's a 30-day notice. I'm moving out." My dad's face darkened. "You're really doing this?" I nodded. "Yes. I've found a place. I'll be out by the end of the month." My mom's voice cracked. "But what about Harper? What about the baby?" I met her eyes. They're not my responsibility. I've contributed more than enough here. I can't keep living in a house where I'm expected to sacrifice everything for someone else's choices. My dad shook his head. We let you stay here. We supported you. I replied, I paid rent. I bought my own groceries. I stayed out of the way. What more did you want my job, my future? They didn't have an answer. My mom sat down, wiping her face with a napkin. You're being selfish, she said. I exhaled slowly. No, I'm choosing myself. There's a difference. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and went upstairs to finish packing. There was nothing left to argue. The line had been crossed, and I had already taken the first step away from it. The morning I moved out felt surreal. I had woken up before sunrise, dressed quietly, and packed the last of my things into 3 bags. Most of what I owned was already in the trunk of my car, hidden under the blanket I had used for weeks. I had coordinated with Lisa to arrive by mid-morning, and she offered to help me carry the heavier items. I didn't expect a peaceful goodbye, and I certainly didn't expect Harper to be asleep through the whole thing, but as I tiptoed downstairs with my bags, I heard the familiar shuffle of my dad's slippers. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed, eyes tired. "You're really going through with this?" he asked. I didn't stop walking. Yes, I said simply. I reached the door and opened it, but he followed me outside. You could have just talked to us. You didn't have to sneak out like a thief in the night. I turned around and faced him. I did talk to you. You just didn't listen. Every time I brought up how unfair this was, you brushed it off. Every time I said I needed space, you handed me a list of chores. He looked wounded, but I didn't let that stop me. My mom appeared in the doorway next to her eyes already red. So that's it. You're abandoning us, she asked. You're abandoning your niece before she's even born, I sighed. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm making a choice, one that's long overdue. She started to speak again, but I held up my hand. You made your expectations clear. You wanted me to be part of a plan I never agreed to. You never asked me what I wanted. You assumed I'd be okay giving up my life because Harper made another mess. At that moment, Harper came out, hair unbrushed, wearing one of my sweatshirts. She looked at the scene with mild curiosity. Don't worry, Mom, she said lazily. If she wants to be selfish, let her. We'll figure it out without her. I looked at her, then back at my parents. This isn't selfishness. This is survival. Lisa pulled up in her car just then. I opened my trunk and we began loading the last of the boxes. My parents kept standing in the driveway, frozen like they couldn't believe this was happening. My mom muttered something about betrayal. My dad called out, "Who's going to help us now?" I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. When we finished loading, I stood for a moment and looked at the house I had grown up in, the windows I used to watch summer storms through, the porch I had sat on during college breaks. None of it felt like home anymore. It felt like a trap I had finally escaped. I got into the car, shut the door, and didn't look back. Lisa drove us toward the city, her music low, the sun rising over the skyline ahead. I felt the tightness in my chest begin to loosen. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Settling into my new place felt like stepping into a different universe. Lisa's apartment was quiet, modest, and free from emotional landmines. The second bedroom wasn't huge, but it had its own window, a decent-sized closet, and a desk already set up in the corner. I unpacked everything in a single day, grateful to have so little. There was no chaos here, no passive-aggressive sighs over dinner, no guilt hanging in the air like smoke. Lisa respected boundaries. She didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer, and she never commented on how much time I spent in my room. That first night we ordered Thai food, watched a comedy special, and didn't talk about anything heavy. It felt like air, but peace doesn't go unnoticed. The very next morning, my phone started buzzing with messages. My mom had sent a string of texts. How could I do this? Harper was devastated the baby would grow up without knowing me, and didn't I care about family? Then came the messages from aunts and cousins, people I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly weighing in. I ignored them all. A few days later, Harper posted a photo of her baby bump on Instagram with a caption that read, "Some people run from love, but I'll teach my daughter what real loyalty looks like." I blocked her immediately. I could have responded. I could have defended myself, but I had spent my entire life doing that and it never changed anything. So I stayed quiet. I focused on my work, my savings, my new life. I started cooking meals again, something I hadn't enjoyed in months. I took walks around the neighborhood in the evenings, appreciating the stillness. I began sleeping through the night. There were no footsteps in the hallway, no slammed doors, no whispered arguments behind walls. For the first time, I had control over my space, my time, my energy. I didn't realize how much I had lost until I stepped away from it. But of course, nothing stays silent forever. 2 weeks after the move, I received an email from my old job's HR department. Apparently, my mom had shown up at the building looking for me. She was crying, saying she needed to talk to her daughter and that it was urgent. The receptionist had to ask her to leave, and my manager later pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay. It was humiliating. That incident cemented everything I already knew. I hadn't just left a house, I had escaped a system that couldn't tolerate independence. They weren't mad that I left. They were mad that I did it on my terms. A month after I left, I got a call from my cousin Rachel. We weren't especially close, but she had always been more neutral than the rest of the family, someone who observed more than she intervened. Her voice was low, almost conspiratorial when she said, "I thought you'd want to know what's happening over there." Apparently, things weren't going as smoothly as my parents had hoped. Harper had the baby 2 weeks early and the delivery had been difficult. She moved even less than usual after that, citing exhaustion and stress. My parents were now waking up at all hours, taking turns feeding the baby, doing laundry, running errands, and cooking meals, while Harper stayed glued to her phone or took long naps during the day. Rachel said my dad looked 10 years older and my mom was constantly snapping at everyone. They had spent most of their retirement savings on renovations to the house that still weren't finished. The contractor had delayed several times, and now they were stuck with a half-done nursery and a growing pile of bills. Meanwhile, Harper showed no signs of finding a job or even thinking about long-term plans. She insisted she was still healing, that she needed time, that motherhood was overwhelming. Rachel paused and then said, "They keep bringing up your name, saying things like, 'If only Melanie were here,' or 'Melanie would have handled this better.'" I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. It wasn't that I wanted them to suffer, but there was something validating about watching reality unfold without me being the scapegoat. They had made their choice, and now they were living with it. It's been 6 months since I left, and I haven't looked back. Occasionally, I'll hear updates through the grapevine, mostly from Rachel or another distant relative who still checks in from time to time. I don't respond to texts from my parents anymore. I've muted their numbers and blocked them on social media. I made it clear that unless they acknowledge what happened and take responsibility for their actions, there's nothing left to talk about. Ironically, if they had just respected my boundaries in the beginning, if they had asked me for occasional help like normal people, I probably would have said yes. I love kids. I wouldn't have minded pitching in once in a while, but they didn't ask. They assigned. They tried to trap me in a role I never agreed to, and when I refused, they punished me for it. Leaving wasn't easy. It was painful and awkward and messy, but it was necessary. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from the people who expect you to sacrifice without limit. Peace doesn't always come with harmony. Sometimes it comes after a storm when you've cleared away everything that was dragging you down. I don't know what the future holds for them, but I know this: I won't be dragged back into that chaos. I've reclaimed my time, my space, and my life, and that's a choice I'll never regret.